everyone, and thanks for joining us today. This is the third part in our three-part series, so this is our final webinar around the RMM 101 series. In part one, we reviewed workstation management. Part two was server and infrastructure management, and today is all about technical analysis and reporting. Presenting today is Scott Parker, Product Manager here at Enable for reporting. So anything report manager related, Scott's going to take us through that in detail. I'm your host, Ali Mahmood. So to kick things off today, we want to talk about the value of reporting. We could jump right into some reports, and as we demoed those reports, we could talk to you about it, but we want to cover the basics in this series. So we're just talking about why reporting. Why should you spend your time, which is already stretched so thin, on generating reports, on reviewing them with your customer and things like that. Then we want to go into the basics of reporting and really what's the difference between reports that I would use in-house for technical analysis versus the reports that I would show to my customers, and we call that business reporting. At the end, we want to give a demo just to drive it all home. We like to give you something hands-on, a little bit practical information of how do I actually generate a report and how do I go through the different areas of a report physically in N-Central. So the value of reporting, it's something that we talk about a lot at Enable. It's something we think that's really important. There's a lot of great tools in N-Central for troubleshooting, for diagnostics. I can go to a specific device and see information on that device, but sometimes a report is necessary to get a bit of a bigger picture and maybe a little bit of a history on a device. So the ability to identify any recurring issues on one specific device or a common issue among many devices, that's something that I couldn't get just by looking at a single device view and seeing today's issues on that device. Whereas a report would show me the last 7 days, the last 30 days, or it would show me multiple servers all experiencing the same issue.
Yeah, so in some cases, you might be running into a situation where you're looking at a device, it's not patching, for example. Something you might want to investigate is whether or not that device was online at the time patching was supposed to kick off. You may not be using Wake on LAN or what have you. You can drill into an individual device and look at, for example, agent status, which I'll show you a bit later. You can look at something called a detailed report that will give you the agent over a period of time that you can choose, and it'll show you when it's up, when it's down, and you can see that, perhaps that agent was offline when patching was set to occur. So of course that would be the reason that we couldn't go ahead with patching. So there's many ways in N-Central to pull out that kind of granular technical data, and we'll cover that as we go.
So and we're going to go into detail on this, but just when I'm onboarding a device and when I've deployed AV Patch and other services to a device, just having a good report to overview that, everything that I've done, and kind of use that as a checklist. So after onboarding, I have a checklist saying, I've captured all the information I need, and after deploying things, just to make 100% sure that I've deployed everything that was necessary on every device.
Yeah, so within N-Central, you're going to get technical reports on things like notifications over a period of time. So if you're interested to see what notifications fired, notifications on specific devices, notifications perhaps for specific technicians or recipients, you're going to have the ability to pull that kind of data out and trend through them. You may be looking at deploying AV or patch. You need a broader overview picture than perhaps the active issues can give you. Reporting is going to give you that information. It's going to show you what you've deployed or what you've approved through patch and where that has ended up today as far as an end result.
Okay, so troubleshooting is something, again, it's something that you do, or your technicians do, and reports are great for you to help troubleshoot faster, to get a bigger picture view. A different type of report is a business report that I would give to my customer. And we really think that where reporting can drive value here is increasing customer satisfaction in a couple different areas. So first of all, just instead of telling somebody what you do, show them what you do. It's one thing to describe your value, it's another thing to hand somebody a business report that's formatted nicely, it has all the information they need in a concise format, and it's simpler to consume. We don't want to dumb down the information that a customer is receiving. We just only want to show them the information that they care about. So For example, showing them that they are 100% covered with AV, just as a single line on a report, simple graphs and things like that are going to show them that they're protected, you're doing your job. That's really just going to impress them at the end of the day.
Customers are commonly going to want to have that piece of paper from you that lets them know that you have your thumb on the pulse of their environment. You really understand what's going on. Telling them is one thing. Actually being able to show them is a completely different thing. And you'll find the response from partners or from customers is considerably better when you're able to produce a clean, easy to understand document with an overview of their environment. Obviously, demonstrating the value of your service offering is very important. Speaking as someone who was in the MSP world for quite a long time, I know that it made a world of difference when I instituted quarterly business reviews. You get that face-to-face time with your client, but when you can come with some really solid reporting, it really kind of ups your game, especially compared to your competition out there. So you really want to come in, you want to prove to your client, look, all this stuff I do in the background, behind the scenes is what's keeping your environment up to date, safe, secure, working properly. And that's not always visible to your customer. So reporting really brings that level of visibility into the picture to show them all the hard work that you do.
Yeah, so and just kind of, taking it one step further, if you show up and you have all the expertise, you have all the information on their network, they don't care who generated the report, if it was a system or if you manually typed it all in. Just you having all the facts in front of them just gives them the confidence that they picked the right person, you have everything that they need to know, and it increases trust between you and the customer and makes you their go-to person. So if they truly believe that you know everything, you have your finger on the pulse and you're in control of things, we think that's going to increase retention and just make your customer happy.
There's plenty of MSPs out there that simply do the job, in a break-fix capacity. In fact, they aren't truly MSPs at that point. They're more of a break-fix service, and you will encounter these commonly where they come in, they do the work, and they go, but they don't really leave any reporting. There's no follow-up, and there's certainly no long-term proactive planning. That's where you as an MSP can really begin to differentiate yourself and show real value to that customer, because it's true that there are lots of folks who can come in and fix a server and leave. It takes a special kind of relationship to come in, fix the problem, but then start making suggestions into 1 year, 2 years into your budget and say, look, based on this reporting, I can show you that these 3 servers are running out of warranty, they're getting old, they're over capacity, we should probably start planning ahead to start up a project to deal with those. We're going to need to do the data migration, we need to get the hardware out of there. You can really help them start to plan for this stuff, because I'm sure, as you all know, customers don't always think about this. The IT equipment tends to be in the back room, and it's just this thing that works, and they rarely think of all the possible ways that thing could stop working. So being able to bring comprehensive reporting that can flesh that stuff out really ups your game in terms of value to your partners. You really become that trusted IT advisor.
Okay, to kind of bring things full circle, we've talked about reports that you can use internally for troubleshooting. We've talked about reports that show your value. So everything that I've done, I have a good way to represent it. But what about attracting new customers? And this is something that a lot of Enable partners have had success with. So if you can leverage our free monitoring licenses, so we have every Enable partner gets a package of free monitoring licenses called Essentials. If you use those with reporting, now I can start doing a free consultation with prospects. So as a sales tool, instead of showing up and just handing somebody a brochure or a pamphlet saying, here are the services that I provide and here's the cost, now I can say, why don't you give me a week with your equipment? So, not a lot of effort. I'm just going to deploy some monitoring. I'm going to monitor for a week, and then let's have a sit down next Monday over coffee. If you can do that and then show up to that Monday meeting with a report that has all the information about their entire network, that is really you educating them, and you're pointing out a lot of flaws in their network, areas that they need help, and this is your chance to start selling. We really think that you're going to be able to build trust with that prospect before you start selling to them. So you come in with a consultative, educational perspective, and it just so happens that you can solve all of the problems that you're pointing out. Doesn't mean they're going to buy everything. I wouldn't recommend going in and pushing 100% AV backup, full help desk services day one. Try to build some trust, try to educate, and maybe point out one or two big problem areas that you can solve for an affordable price to start the relationship off on a good place, and then use the same report over time to go back to and say, we still haven't solved that AV problem completely. Why don't we think about deploying that? And again, just over time, this is a tool that you can use with your current customers. And so it says attract new customers, but really you can attract any new sales that you want to go after. Having an assessment report that points out those gaping holes is always a good conversation starter for you before you pitch your services.
Yeah, and to that point, having metrics is always better than just simply, talking to a client. There's certainly, back in the day, there were many times where we'd come in, we'd do a quick assessment, you have a conversation with them, but it doesn't come across as well if you don't have numbers to back it up, because now it's just my word against theirs or what their opinion of their environment is. Once you start bringing in reporting into the mix, now you have hard data, you have metrics, you can have a piece of paper that is not emotionally tied to me or my sales process at all. It's just the facts, and you can point to that, point out the issues that they may have, and you'll find customers react to that considerably better than simply just you explaining it to them, especially as a new person coming in the door, a new MSP coming in the door. Obviously reporting is going to help a lot, especially in situations where they've had, that one IT guy forever. As far as they're aware, he's been doing everything right. As I'm sure many of you know, that isn't always the case. They bring in an MSP or an outside consulting service, and they start poking around, and they find out, all sorts of issues. And these reports that we've endeavored to give you should get you on the path to producing that kind of information quickly, efficiently, without having to spend all day walking around the environment trying to gather that information.
Yeah, so those three things we think kind of sums up the value of reporting. And we hope that you see it too, that being able to troubleshoot hopefully faster and have that big picture view, giving some reports of value to back you up when you do your quarterly or monthly business reviews with your customers, and then having a sales tool to attract new customers and increase the number of leads that you're getting that way. Three big values, but why isn't everybody doing it if it's such a critical service and it has so much value? Some of the things that we hear from MSPs is that they think it sounds like a time-consuming activity. So every month I got to carve out a whole day or however long they think it might take to generate these reports. Another thing is cost. What's it going to cost to implement a reporting solution, and am I going to have to staff somebody to manage a new piece of technology to do that? So there's this perceived cost associated with it. And a lot of people think, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'm talking to my customer now. They seem to value what I'm saying, and why isn't a face-to-face conversation good enough? And really, we don't see reporting replacing your face-to-face conversation. Like Scott just said, it's your backup. Instead of you describing a problem, and there's kind of a conflict of interest really. If you're talking about, hey, your AV is 50% coverage and we need to cover the other half, that kind of sounds like you selling right from the get-go. Instead, if you can have the conversation and point to a report and you just say, here are the facts, it's kind of you letting the customer lead the conversation because you're showing them the problems, and then it's their decision whether or not they're going to live with it.
Sure. You can come in here and you can go to your partner and say, look, I see that you have 50% of these devices covered by AV, or maybe even higher, maybe 80%, but they're covered by 5 different AV products. Some of them are up to date. Some of them haven't updated for 6 years. Some of them haven't been running scans. That kind of information is usually news to the MSP. They assume that everything is sorted out. You just telling them that, very difficult to explain at a level they're going to be comfortable with. You bringing in a report that just lays it all to bear on the table, much easier to point to, much easier to have a very quick conversation about the value of having AV and done deal. So it certainly will speed those conversations along and result in a higher success rate.
Exactly. So just now to jump into kind of the basics on analysis and reporting, and again, this series is the 101 introductory to analysis and reporting. We have what we call the device management lifecycle, and we've been talking about this for the last few parts in this series. It's broken into 4 stages. Stage 1 being onboarding, so that's the one-time activity I do to get a device into my management platform. Then there's 3 parts in the cycle that just keep going around and around throughout the life cycle of managing that device. So I manage it, I support it when issues come up, and I report on those activities, either an internal technician reporting to a supervisor or me reporting to the customer. And how do I go about all of these activities? To get specifics on workstation management and server management, that's the first 2 parts of the series, and we will be sending a recording of those to everybody on today's webinar, so don't worry, you'll be able to go through those 2 webinars. Today is all about reporting, and how does reporting play into each stage of the management life cycle. With onboarding, onboarding is, again, it's that one-time activity. I go out, I discover a bunch of devices, I set up my monitoring, now they're in the system. And we think that we have a couple great reports that are going to help you to streamline that and just make sure that you've checked everything off and you've accomplished everything you needed to in that onboarding process.
Yeah, so there's a couple of situations where I've used these reports very effectively for my onboarding efforts within my own customer base. So, for example, one of the first things I want to do is a wall-to-wall inventory. Well, there's a technician going out there for a day at least to wander around the environment with a spreadsheet, gather a bunch of IP addresses, hopefully hunt down everything, and hopefully not miss anything. But even during those manual inventories, I often find, a customer's got a wireless router taped behind a server in a corner somewhere, or it's in the roof and you didn't even know it was there. These things can be very easily overlooked. Often the customers don't know they're even there. What I want to be able to do is deploy my agents, deploy my probe, have it detect everything with an IP, and produce me a really nice hardware inventory report that I can now cull through, looking to make sure that everything I'm expecting to be there is there. Things that I'm not expecting, maybe aren't in the contract yet, are brought to light. Eliminate the gray area between what I think I support and what the customer supports, which is always a dangerous place. We want to make sure they're aware of all the devices in their environment. We want to flesh out exactly what I'm supporting and what I'm not supporting, and we don't want any missing pieces of equipment that are going to surprise me later. The hardware inventory report can produce that data in about a minute, maybe 30 seconds, whereas a full day of walking around would have typically been used. And even then you wouldn't get all of that data. For example, warranty data on hardware is going to be populated into this report. That kind of thing in the past would have required me to come back with the serial numbers, go onto the manufacturer's websites, look up that information. It's a very slow process. Hardware inventory report will pull all that for me. I can just staple that to the contract and we're done. Software inventory report is a similar kind of thing. I've run into many cases in the past where I ask, is there any special software in your environment? They say, no, not at all. I say, okay, perfect. We basically have done a quick inventory of software. We've agreed we're going to support all the Microsoft products and what have you. And then 3 weeks later, their primary POS system goes down. And I say, I don't see a Microsoft inventory for this particular piece of software. And then they tell me a college kid wrote it for them 7 years ago, and they don't know where he is, and they don't know how to support it, and they don't know how to fix it, and they hadn't really thought about it until it broke. Software inventory reports will bring that kind of information to light before it's too late. So I'll often run that software inventory report, again, cull through it, looking for, I would sort it by software, in this case, looking for software I don't recognize. We're going to bring that out in the initial contract negotiation. We're going to bring it up and say, how are we going to support this thing when it goes down? Because someday it will. And we need to make either plans to do that or plans to replace it. All of these are value add conversations that the average MSP is not going to have with your customer until it's too late. If you can produce reports like this ahead of time, you can be the one bringing that information to the table and leading the conversation and really proving your value as a top tier MSP.
So then, like we said, onboarding is that one-time activity versus management, which is that kind of recurring, constantly keeping it up to date with patches, making sure that AV is deployed, making sure I'm running backups, everything that I do to keep that device running, preventative maintenance, all of that. And same thing, N-central comes with these built-in reports that, yes, I could go to the specific device, I could see the current active issues, I could solve a current problem, I can get the specific details on one thing, but we think that this is where reporting comes into play to give you a bit of a bigger picture.
Right, so we have a sampling of ones that I have used in the past effectively. So we have the remote control history, which is in the N-Central product. And no need for a report manager here. In fact, all three of these are the N-Central product. So you're going to have a remote control history, so I can view what remote controls happened to what devices, when it happened, how long it lasted, who did the remote control. So if something goes wrong, I could have a bit of a historical background on what exactly affected that system from our point of view. Also, the service availability, I touched on that earlier, but for example, if you want to see when agent status was up and alive and when it wasn't, you can see one little instance here where it went offline. If a customer is telling you this device is up and down all day, or they missed patching or what have you, you can easily run this, and I'll show you how to do that in the N-Central system and see what did that system do. Or if you find, Exchange systems are going up and down, up and down, up and down, you can run this report and you'll see it going red every time that agent goes offline. Perhaps you can correlate that. Perhaps it happens every day at 10 o'clock at night for an hour. Well, what else am I doing at 10 o'clock at night for an hour? Oh, I was running backups. Oh, it shut down the VM, or what have you. You can start to correlate problems in the environment based on just simple little reports like this. The last thing I want to bring your attention to is the audit trail. In N-Central 10.0, we have brought in something called direct support. Direct support has a fully fleshed out audit trail built into it that logs every direct support action taken on a device. So you're going to be able to go in there and look back through the history, looking to understand what policies were run on the system. Basically anything that was done to that system through the direct support console is now logged, and so you're going to have direct visibility into that. And so that'll help you and your technicians understand what's happened in the past, what's been run in the past, and maybe what hasn't been tried to the device, etc.
Okay, so moving on to support, so I've managed the device, I'm doing my preventative maintenance, but then something happens, an issue comes up, it's time to go to work and fix that issue. The big thing that reporting plays in here is that, rather than just responding to each issue one at a time and resolving it, running a report on all tickets and all support activities that I've done helps me really understand how efficient I'm being. Am I doing a good job with this customer? Am I taking too long on those tickets? Just giving me a little bit of an insight there.
Right, so we're able to tie into things like ConnectWise, Autotask, and our own help desk manager and pull ticketing information from it. We're also able, of course, to create tickets into those systems. So what we want to be able to do is then pull those metrics into our executive summaries and our bigger quarterly business reviews, so we can correlate ticket volume with levels of activity, levels of effort across that period of time. So I always used to bring in a ticketing summary where I would present, we had estimated, and I usually do this in my contract, I estimate about 120 tickets a month for your environment, and I'm basing some kind of fee on that. I will show them we actually got 240 tickets last month. So I'm not charging you anymore, but I just want you to understand the level of effort we put into making sure that your environment is working well. You can also see things like, is it a proactive ticket? Is it a reactive ticket? So did the system create it automatically? Did someone click a button to create it as a reactive measure? You get a bit more insight into that. So as long as you have a PSA tool that you can pull this data from, and Help Desk Manager is a great option, it will pull all that data seamlessly into your reports and allow you to bring that to the table as well.
Okay, and just to kind of drive that home, we just talked about ticket management, reporting on that, but tickets they apply more than just to a help desk or responding to a support issue. It happens during onboarding, during management, all the activities that I do there. And at the end, I want to be able to report on every ticket that I've done, to see the performance everywhere, but also to have the conversation with the customer that, this is all the activity that I've done, not just in support, but also during management, during onboarding, and all the activities that I do. And because we always get this question of, which ticket management solutions, which PSAs are supported, Autotask, ConnectWise, and Enable's Help Desk Manager are all fully integrated there. So everything that you see in N-Central supports all three of those fully. For other ticket management solutions, we do have an email to ticket creation option, so we should be able to work something out there for you. Now, reporting is something we didn't dive very deeply in on the other two webinars, but what we want to talk about here are the two types of reports. And one is a technical analysis report. Those are the reports that you see in the N-Central product. So those are right in the RMM. They're meant to be used by technicians to get, like we were saying before, technical insights, get a bit of a bigger picture view when you're troubleshooting and supporting equipment. The business reports are in Report Manager, and Report Manager is a separate module from N-Central, and that's a database, runs on SQL Server. That runs separately from N-Central and currently is only supported for an on-premises installation, just because we also get that question often. So in N-Central, we have tons of data. We have all this remote monitoring data around the device information, so all the asset data, warranties, everything we need to know about a device, but then also on the services that you're delivering, AV, patch, backup, etc. In N-Central, as we mentioned, we generate what we call technical analysis reports, and that's really has a troubleshooting focus, meant for a technician. Some of these could be for customer consumption. I could pull up a laptop and I could show a customer the status of devices, but really those aren't meant to be emailed. They're kind of baked into N-Central. Scott, you want to take us through some of the details on analysis for that?
Yeah, so built into N-Central, as we mentioned, we have fairly technical reports. They aren't necessarily things you're going to be using as a customer-facing report. They're more for your technicians. We're going to be looking at things like server licensing, so where are your licenses distributed, how many do you have left. You'll have reports on patch, AV, backup, the status of them, their installation state, their functionality state. It will be covered in all these types of reports as well. So day to day, when you need that big picture overview of how something's going, maybe you're rolling out AV to a new partner. Well, we're going to drill down to the customer level. We're going to run that AV installation status report. We're going to get all of it in one nice, quick, easy to view screen. What versions are out there? Are they installed? Were they successful? If they weren't successful, why weren't they successful? Just that quick, healthy overview that will help you kind of move forward and get the job done, as it were, rather than having to go through maybe an active issues view or a dashboard and granularly look around. This will pull it all together into one nice, easy to understand report.
Okay, and we compare that, as I mentioned, to business reporting, which there's so much data in N-Central that we didn't want to add a reporting tool on top of that had years and years of data. So what we've done is we've created a separate module called Report Manager, and that again sits on its own SQL database, and you can store up to 7 years of data there, more if you have the space for it, but generally 7 years is plenty. And really that's where we start to generate those customer-facing business reports. And we'll go into detail on those, but again, that's kind of the difference. Is the N-Central reports are for technical analysis and really just technician consumption. These are also for customer consumption.
Right. So in these kinds of reporting, specifically, you're going to be looking at the executive summary. That is my go-to quarterly business review report. It has what we call the scorecard at the beginning, which is a nice high-level overview with lots of colorful graphs, lots of useful information, but at a high level about how the environment's functioning, from everything from warranty on systems to patch to AV to backup to ticket summaries. It's all included in that first 4 pages or so. The whole report is very configurable. It's schedulable, so you can have it automatically go out for you. And then any section that gets a lower score, you're going to be able to have it automatically expand on that section, provide a deep dive into detail as to the state of how things are, why things are the way they are, and perhaps bring to light some sales opportunities and just some attention on things you feel your client needs. And this is that proactivity we're looking for. This is you coming to your customer and saying, based on the report that I see, we need to buff up your AV. These servers are expiring. We need to plan to do something with them. And this is going to help you not only from a sales opportunity, but it's going to help build your trust with your customer, bring you in as that trusted advisor, raise your level as the trusted advisor, and really make sure that they understand you do a lot of work in the background and you have your finger on the pulse of the environment. Because, like I say, anyone can walk through the door and say, we do the same thing they do and we do it cheaper. And you're going to lose clients that way, and I've certainly lost many clients myself that way. What you need to do is come to the table with reporting that the other guy is not going to have and a depth that the other guy is not going to have. So you look like the rock star, you look like that tier 1 MSP that they want to deal with, that they trust, as opposed to just anyone else who comes to the door. And what you'll find is they'll start turning away those people who come to the door because they don't know, the customer will say, you don't know me like my MSP knows me. I need the guys I have. They understand my environment. You really want to leave the customer with that grain of thought in their head at all times. And this kind of reporting will get you there. You also may want to provide them with an overall assessment. So for example, when I take on a new customer or I'm prospecting, I'll often deploy my essential licensing and run my assessment report. The assessment report gives you a nice high-level picture of all the hardware that's in there. So it brings in elements of the hardware inventory report, the software inventory report, warranty reporting across multiple devices, breakdowns of what kind of OSs are out there. It's also going to bring in patch, AV. It's really going to do a full high-level assessment of that environment. It's a great way to provide a bit of a shock and awe to a prospective client. I certainly have done that many times, especially when they have that one IT guy. There's often a lot of issues in the environment. Running a report like this and just highlighting, sitting with the client, highlighting the problems with a pen as you go through is often a real shock for them. They often don't realize that they have these issues. So this is a great report to get that done. Or if you're just taking on a new client, you can run the assessment report and staple it to your contract just for archival purposes. Here's the baseline, here's how we started, and you can compare that year over year.
Okay, great. Scott, I'll hand things over to you. Really what we want to do is just give you again a quick high-level overview of reporting, take you through some of these reports, and Scott will walk us through and give us an idea of what specific insights can I get from an Incentro report versus some of the insights that I could get from a report manager, kind of a printed out PDF report.
Sure. All right. Well, that sounds great. We're going to go to Incentro 10, which is something we've just released and is just kind of getting out there into the wild at this point. But it's a complete UI revamp, new look and feel, added a lot of new tools to the system. Really a great release for us, a very considerable release for us. And I think you'll really enjoy it. And in there, we've introduced a couple new reports I'm going to bring your attention to. But all in all, I'm just going to be navigating through 10. If you haven't seen 10 yet, hopefully you'll get a good impression of it today. So let's just dig into some very high-level stuff first. So I mentioned earlier, you may want to go look at a device and see what a particular service has been doing over time. So that's called detailed status, and many people don't even know this report exists, and it is on a device level in many cases, but I personally find this one of my favorite reports. Now, we are going to pop into monitoring, and we're going to go to agent status. So from an agent status perspective, for example, maybe I've been patching, maybe I'm concerned that this device isn't patching properly, I'm not quite sure why it's not patching, maybe the device has been offline at night. I can go into agent status, I can go to reports, and under reports for a particular service, I can go to detailed status, and detailed status will allow me to pick a date range, so I'm going to go for a month in this case. View report. Here's what this device has been doing for the last month, and as you can see currently it's green, which means normal, if you're familiar at all with the L devices and active issues dashboard. But what's really cool about this is anytime the state does change, you're going to see this bar change color at the hour it changed. So for example, if I'm patching at 2 a.m., but I see red between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m., obviously this device has been offline, or if it's blue, it's been in a disconnected state. Obviously I missed my patch window because the device was offline. Really great way to see that kind of information at a quick glance, and many people don't realize this is here, so I wanted to make sure I brought this to your attention.
And Scott, we had someone asking if they should do this on a per server basis or if there was a multiple server view.
So this particular option here is on a per service view, and it's very specific to the one device. So in this particular case, it's the one device. Down in the reporting section, there is a section that you can run detailed status across a device. Really, the times that you're going to be using this typically are when you think a service on a device has been maybe fluctuating up and down or offline at the time you expected to be able to use it. This will correlate that information for you. I've also used it, people will tell me, well, my CPU spikes like crazy at certain times of the day. It's really hard to kind of validate that information. You can come in here, find CPU, run this report. You'll see what CPU has been doing at all times of the day, and maybe you'll notice that it's been fluctuating up and down specifically at 10 o'clock at night. Well, perhaps there's something going on with the system at 10 o'clock at night that I need to know about. Maybe I'm running backups. Maybe there's some other application that's spamming email across the internet. It's going to help me narrow, kind of zero in on what times of day specifically am I having trouble. Our new reporting engine within the N-central system has a couple new elements, and I'm just going to mention them here for people who are new to this. On the left-hand side, you're going to have the ability to pull out your variables. So where you used to be able to configure the variables, hit save, and it would just kind of do its thing, now it's a sidebar, so you can continually adjust the variables. So I can come here and say I want a month, view report. I can shrink down that window again and go back to my report. So there it is there. So just for anyone who's not familiar with it, this is something new we've added in 10, the ability to adjust kind of on the fly. All right, so moving a little bit away from granularity at this point, I'm going to drop down to the customer view, because this is typically where we're going to do our reports. We do have SO or service organizational level reports, and they tend to give you kind of a high level view, but typically when I'm running reports I want to be at the customer level. So I'm going to drill down there. You're going to find things like administrative reports, so license usage, where are licenses in your N-central system used, what devices are they attached to, and you'll notice these produce very quickly. N-central is very good at producing this data on the fly. You can see all the licensing I have available to me, what devices they're attached to, when they got attached. All that information is valuable in terms of managing my N-central server. Remote Support Manager, it's going to give me a summary of all things remote control. So when did remote control launch, who launched it, when did they use it. Events, for example, AV Defender threats over time, self-healing events that may have happened. So I might be interested to know, what self-healing events are kicking off in my system and what result are they having. Well, I can see what self-healing attempts happened, which ones succeeded, which ones failed, what devices ran them, and when. Lots of great information, again at a fairly high-level technical level. Status is going to give me things like a technical executive summary, AV Defender, installation status, backup manager status. Are my backups running? Are they effective? Some of these could be considered customer-facing reports for sure. AV Defender status, backup manager. Report manager is going to give you more depth, more customization, more scheduling options, but certainly within N-central itself, I made use of these reports for years. Report manager just gives you that, new level of professionalism, really. The executive summary, if you're using the executive summary today, it tends to be highly technical, but certainly can be explained to a customer. The nice thing about the report manager reports is you don't really need to explain things. They're pretty much self-explanatory. These, they might need you to sit with the customer and help them out a little bit, but they still produce some really excellent information. So for example, if I view this report, what am I doing in this executive summary? Well, I'm mostly managing by exception. I'm looking for things that are oddball. So in this case, I might sit down with my customer and explain what we're looking at here is the busyness of CPUs across your various devices. We can see one of these devices is all over the map. This is something I'd look into ahead of time with my technical team. Is it normal? Is it not? And if not, I'm going to bring this to the attention of the client and walk them through what I would suggest we do about it. Disk usage, same kind of thing. We're looking for disks filling up. Now in this case I have one that is absolutely maxed out, and we might want to have a chat with the client about what's going on there. Or future planning for a replacement. Physical memory and virtual memory, obviously we're looking for virtual memory kind of pinging up to a high level and sticking there. That could indicate maybe overuse of a system, maybe a system that's due for a refresh. Those kinds of things I'd check into before visiting the client, but then come in with a plan and whether or not I need to speak to them about it. Traffic through various routers, just watching for traffic incidents. There's an option to show notifications as well, and I might do that in select circumstances, but chances are this is the report that I'd be running. And of course you can schedule all these reports as well, so they can come automatically out of the system and be delivered directly to your client or directly to your client service management, whoever is going to be talking to your customer. Now, Report Manager can be accessed through the N-central system. Report Manager, as Ali mentioned, is a standalone SQL server. It's got up to 7 years worth of data. And unlike N-central, which tends to be current date only, so if you're running things like patch reports, it's typically going to show you the state of patching now. You can choose a history, but that history will lead up to what is it looking like today. Report Manager will allow you to do points in time in history. So you're going to be able to run, what did patch look like back in 2013 during the week of, or the month of January. That is more likely, if you want those historical type reports, you want Report Manager. If you're looking for compare the past to right this second, that is what you're going to be doing in N-central. And one thing I'm going to mention actually before I leave the N-central world here is we have a new report in 10 that I highly recommend you look at. If you are in the habit of doing patch reporting, you're going to like this new report, Patch Approvals and Installations. It will show you based on the approvals that you've set, what then was the result? So if I approved and declined a bunch of patches today, what was the result of those approvals and declines? So very valuable report. I actually use this and this exclusively for patch reporting pretty much at this point. So highly recommend you take a look at that one if you're doing patch reporting. In Report Manager then we have managed assets, which is going to be sort of hardware, software based type things. That hardware inventory report that we talked about earlier, that is in there. Let me bring up a copy. I've pre-run these because they take a few minutes and we're a little pressed for time here, of course, today. But there's a hardware inventory report. That's going to give you a nice clean Excel sheet or PDF of exactly what the environment looks like. And I can choose these fields, but I've chosen CPU, make, model, serial number, etc. Really valuable if you're just looking for that kind of lay of the land of their hardware. Great for onboarding, as I mentioned earlier. You're going to find things like that software inventory, and again, I'll get you a bigger picture of that just so you can see it. But you can sort it in all sorts of different ways. In this case, I'm sorted by device, but you can sort it by specific package as well. All right, and then back to Report Manager. You're going to see other things in here, but they all pretty much fall into the inventorying of things and whatnot. Now, if we go to Managed IT Services, this is more the kind of thing you're taking to quarterly business reviews. So you're looking at AV status across all your devices. You're looking at that executive summary. You're going to be looking at things like the network assessment report, which we talked about a little bit earlier. Patch information, including the new patch reports that we produced as well. So this is where you're going to come to find things that you're going to take to your quarterly business review. And those things can include, as I mentioned, that executive summary, which is totally brandable, schedulable. It's going to give you that what we call the scorecard, so that nice 5-page overview that CIOs and in many cases people who aren't super technical are really going to like. They just want that broad overview. Those types of folks are going to love the scorecard. Once you get beyond the scorecard, which covers everything from warranty to to antivirus, to backup, to patch, it's also then going to expand on any section that had problems, so any section that fell below the score that we feel acceptable, into more detail. So it's gonna bring out considerably more detail so that I can do a deep dive into it with my customer, identify where the problem is, and then come up with a solution and a plan for them, because that's where that additional value comes out. To gather all this data by hand would have taken possibly weeks. Executive summary produces itself in probably about a minute. So, in fact, probably less than that. So you absolutely will find yourself far ahead by having something like Report Manager to produce these. Report Manager in general is going to really kind of bring your game up to speed with quarterly business reviews, with the ability to do full inventories of environments and produce really nice sales material. All of that can be done within the Report Manager tool in minutes rather than hours or days. So certainly for me, it made a huge difference to my environment. Everybody was running these reports, from sales to the technical staff to the help desk staff. All of these reports are very valuable. Now, the last thing I will show you is the ability to schedule, because that is pretty important. You're going to be able to go into these sorts of reports. You're going to be able to choose, let's say, AV status report. Once you have settled on your selections, let's go back a month, for example, and we'll do Windows laptops and servers. Instead of just generating the report, which I could do in HTML, PDF, etc., multiple different ways to get out of the system, I can schedule reports. Scheduling reports is going to bring me into a scheduled report wizard where I can configure some basic details. I can add an email attached to it along with HTML entries, so I can make it fairly flashy. I'm just going to put in a random recipient email here. There we go. I have a feeling that might bounce. And there we are. You can configure how often you want it to come out of the system, where you want it to go to, details of what I've configured, and it's going to go and then generate my report in the background and make it available to me for editing if I so choose later on. So that's scheduling reports. And of course, ideally, I want to schedule those reports to just automatically come out of the system. I want them to go to my sales team. I want them to go to my technical team. Maybe in some cases, I want them to go straight to my customer if they're just a high-level overview. All in all, that'll get us through Report Manager and Central Technical Reporting. Any other things you wanted to cover today?
Oh, I think that's good, Scott. A really great demo, and we hope that you got what you were hoping out of the webinar. Like I mentioned before, we wanted to give that really high-level overview of many different areas of reporting. If you want to take a deeper dive with anything, I would really recommend attending one of our daily technical Q&As. And that's basically where we just get a subject matter expert, a solutions architect on the phone, and he just takes questions from the audience, and we try to go through as much content as possible in those. So Scott, there are a number of questions, and everyone, we're going to stick around for the next 10 minutes just to get to those questions. So Scott, we have a couple people asking about details in reports. Can you speak a little bit more about PSA and ticketing reporting? What information can I get in there? And then move on to AV and what AV solutions can I monitor?
So as far as PSA ticketing is concerned, as we mentioned, ConnectWise, Autotask, or our own help desk manager will integrate with our reporting system. We're going to pull data from those and as well add in the N-Central data. So we're going to be able to kind of pull from both sides. You're going to be able to pull that data into either your executive summary or a report that is actually aimed at PSA ticketing specifically. And it's going to show you graphs of tickets in and out of the system, open versus closed, proactive versus reactive. All of that's going to be pulled into your N-Central reports. So now you don't need to go produce reports from your PSA and from your reporting tool in the N-Central side. Just produce that one single simple report. Be confident that I would expect that most of the information you want to talk about is in that report, and you can simply take that along with you. So yeah, really good integration from a ticketing perspective for all three of those products.
And then just on antivirus, Scott, maybe speak to what antiviruses we would typically monitor and report on.
Oh, sure. So we have a couple ways to do that. So we're going to be reporting directly on our own AV Defender, of course. So AV Defender details will be prolific within our reports. If you're using AV Status, a service that will monitor a multitude of something like 40 different AVs as far as are they installed, are they updating properly, that information will also feed into our reports. So if you have AV Status up and running, we're going to be able to pull in that report. And that AV Status covers more than I can count: Kaspersky, AVG, Symantec, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, Scott, so someone asking, we had mentioned essential licenses, those free monitoring licenses. What can I report on an essential license versus a professional license?
Oh, so pretty much everything. That assessment report specifically is the one I would refer to there, and basically everything. But on an Essentials license, unless you have purchased the ability to run automation on Essentials licenses, you won't be able to use the AV status. So some of the AV information will be a little less than dramatic. So it'll pull whatever's in the Security Center entry in the registry, but that's about it. Now, if you run the AV status service, so you have automation enabled on your Essential licenses, now you can run AV status. It will go and proactively find these AV products, populate Security Center with the right info, and we can pull that info. So it depends on how committed you have become to auditing that environment. If you just purely go on Essentials though, 85-90% of that report still populates with everything you would expect.
Yeah, so just to drive that home, if you have a professional node, you report on 100%. If you're on Essentials, you're reporting on 80%. But instead of upgrading to a professional, you can just do the $1 a node add-on for automation, things like that. So instead of fully upgrading, you can just buy a simple add-on. Okay, so on the hardware and software inventory reports, if I have discovered a device with N-Central, but I haven't imported it to manage it, will I still be able to detect it with that report?
So you need to import them into the system, but you don't need to install agents on them necessarily. So we can still get quite a lot of information without agents. It won't be as deep a dive as an agent would be, because an agent is tied directly into the system, has direct access to WMI and asset inventories and all that kind of good stuff. If you don't use an agent, so you're doing purely probe-based discovery, the report won't be as deep a dive as you would have had with an agent, but I think you'll find it still gives you quite a lot of information that you wouldn't have otherwise had.
Scott, we have someone asking, when is it right to automatically schedule reports to go to a customer versus reviewing them myself?
So that is really a personal choice. It depends how brave you are. I personally, in our environment, insisted that we vet every report that goes out because it may be that we have done something on our side, a human error component, where we have put something in a downtime, forgotten to import a device. Maybe we've made a mistake. But maybe it's not something that's going to impact the customer, but if it pops up in a report, it's going to cause a lot of questions or what have you. So usually I have those reports set up to fire off to my client service manager or a FTP repository where he just goes or she just goes and reviews them. And then if they deem them all right, then they'll fire them off. If they deem that they need to engage technical staff to explain something, they will do that and then fire them off with an explanation. Usually straight to the customer is risky in almost any sense in some ways, because you never, without looking at the report, you don't know what your customer is receiving. And honestly, the value in these reports in many ways is sitting with the client and going through it. If you're just firing them the reports, they will either often not even look at them or be more confused than if they hadn't received them to begin with, because they're not technical in many cases. I had a lot of folks who were, the accountant was also their technical representative. So he didn't really understand what was going on. He was there just to make sure the checks got paid and that it wasn't too expensive. That kind of recipient won't understand what you're sending them. But if you sit down with them and start educating them, A, that raises your value. B, there's sales opportunities for you there. C, they're going to see you as that trusted advisor, and they will slowly offload the weight of trying to figure out how their technology is going to go in the next 3 years to you, which is ideally what you want. So in best case, you really should be sitting with the clients at least every quarter and reviewing the key reports that you want to give them.
Okay, great. Scott, you had mentioned at one point about customizing reports, so can you just speak to branding and what elements of a report could be customized?
Sure. Well, any of our reports, you're going to be able to go through and choose how it's filtered, how it's organized. And with Report Manager reports, you're going to get even more depth to that, what devices are included and et cetera. When it comes to actual, first of all, branding is throughout the system. So Report Manager has its own branding console, and Central is going to take branding from the branding section under administration. So all the reports will have your logo and that kind of information on it. When it comes to actual custom reporting, well, that's a little trickier. In order to get into custom reporting, you're going to need to get Microsoft Report Builder up and running. You've got to have that on-premise solution with Report Manager. We're going to tie into that SQL database, and we're going to be able to create reports using what we call report parts. Report parts are elements of other reports that we've made available to you as widgets, essentially, and you can pull them into Microsoft Report Builder and build reports based on that. But that said, you will still have to tie them all back together using a SQL. So there's still some SQL knowledge that's going to have to happen there. So ideally, you are bringing to the table someone who is fairly well versed in SQL before you get into the depths of really trying to manipulate reports. That said, there are some ways that you can do that. In the NRC, the Enable Resource Center, under Product Documentation, you're going to find Report Managers section. In there, you're going to find the Data Dictionary, which defines all of the fields in our system that you can then leverage to create reports with. You're also going to find a complete guide on building custom reports. And as well, we also offer technical training, which is also on the NRC under training. You can get into a technical training course on building custom reports. But again, you really want to be bringing to the table some SQL knowledge before you get too far down that path.
Okay, and Scott, a few people with feature requests and wanting to know what the roadmap is for the product. We can't speak to details because we're owned by a public company, but can you just speak to do we continue to invest in Report Manager, or are we going to keep adding features? I'm assuming some of the ones people are talking about, but just in general, what's our plan for the product?
Yeah, for sure. So absolutely, I'm very new to the Report Manager product. I've only been with it for a couple of months, but I have actually been using it as a customer for years, and and now experiencing it as first a sales engineer and now product management here at Enable. So I have many years of experience with Report Manager. Definitely going to be bringing a lot to it in the future. I have several reports in mind, but absolutely I want to hear from you folks out there on functionality and reporting. So if you have thoughts on the product, we would absolutely love it if you would go into the Enable forums. That's on the NRC under Community Forums. Look for the reporting section and absolutely put any thoughts, or feature requests that you might have in there. I do go through that on a regular basis. I don't always get time to post, but I absolutely do read through them all. So put them in there. If there's something that I'm particularly interested in or don't have any data on, I might opt to perhaps reach out to you and ask some more questions about what you had in mind. So definitely please do get involved in that forum community. I spend lots of time in there and would love to hear from you.
Okay, excellent. Scott, really appreciate you joining us. Thanks for the great demo and all that great content.
Thank you.
If you're not currently an Enable partner, I'd really recommend you hit the website at n-able.com/try. If you fill up that trial form, we'll reach out to you, so it doesn't have to be specifically about trying in Central. That trial form will get you access to any of our products, and we'll contact you just to make sure that you get what you need out of your trial. Really appreciate everyone joining today. That concludes our 3-part 101 series on remote monitoring and management. Next week, we're taking a deep dive on PSA integration. So next week is Autotask integration. The following week is ConnectWise integration. So if you're using Autotask with N-Central, please attend next week. You're really going to want to see that content. If you're using ConnectWise with N-Central, please attend in 2 weeks so you can get the most out of that integration. Everyone, again, thanks for your time. Have a great day. We really appreciate you joining us.